I will call the Board of Finance to order on Monday, January 8th, 2024. Good year. Board of Finance. And the first item on the agenda is the agenda. I would welcome a motion on it.
I would just like to note that there was one update to the agenda. Item 3.3, the contract for Juneteenth 2024. There was one very minor update made. Haley noticed that the motion in this item accidentally said Juneteenth 2023. We just updated it to Juneteenth 2024. You'll see an updated document on there. That's the only change that was made, and I just want to note that before we move any further.
Still staying in consent.
Yes.
I'm happy to move the agenda as indicated on Civic Clerk.
Okay, thank you, Councilor McGee. Good. Second by Councilor Barlow. Any further discussion of the agenda for noting that amendment? Catherine, any further discussion? Seeing none, let's go to a vote. All those in favor of adopting the agenda as sworn on board docs, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We have an agenda. The next item is the public forum. Is there anyone here in the room this year to speak to the Board of Finance public forum? I don't believe so. Anyone online? And yes, we do have Sharon Busher joining us. Go ahead, Sharon. You should be able to talk now.
Yes, hi, good evening and Happy New Year to all of you. I looked at this agenda and maybe I just couldn't see it, but with the item on consent that has to do with the user fee and a proposal and the bids, excuse me, and then BED's ADMS, which also has a selection of a bid. I couldn't see the number of bids or the spread in cost. And so in the past, I have seen that be brought forward as part of the packet. So anyways, I just wasn't sure. I thought it is informative to know if there were a number of bids or if there was only one bid. I always found that useful to know. So that's just a comment. As far as BED's proposal to make the EAP, move that from a pilot to a permanent policy, it's wonderful. I want to applaud them, thank them so much. And the downside of having public forum is that sometimes you make a comment before you're educated. So here we go. This has to do with the Urban 3 presentation that you're going to see. And this may really be the wrong interpretation of this, but it looked to me like we were looking at the city and the potential value that each area had. And I was concerned about that because I felt that if that was the correct interpretation, I felt like that was really just giving information to investors and developers. And although there's a desire to have housing, etc., I would like to think that there's a diversity of ownership with people that live in the city owning and not just investors who sometimes have only interest is financial. And so I'll look to see what the presentation says and see if I'm right or wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll be very happy. If I'm right, I'll probably have more questions. But as I said, this is the downside of public forum when you maybe draw the wrong conclusion. But thank you for listening.
Okay, great. Thank you for calling in, Sharon. And we are joined tonight by Joe Minicozzi from Urban 3, and we're excited to have you with us tonight back virtually in Burlington. Joe, I've seen Joe speak numerous times over the years. We're excited to have him working on Burlington's tax analysis. So that is not going to be, as I hope you've seen, Joe, until the end of our agenda. So we probably have half hour at least, maybe longer, before we're going to be able to get to you. But thanks for zooming in.
Great, thanks.
Councilor Bergman, I see that you have your hand raised. Are
Thank
you
you.
seeking to speak in public forum?
Yeah, I guess so. And the reason is because of the item on the user fees being in consent. And I just want to say, although I could read into the the scope of work that we'll consider, excuse me for my continuing coughing, the economic ability of people to pay for things like classes, like open skating, what have you, that it's not exactly explicit. And so I really just want to say that we don't want our user fees to go so high as that poor and working people can't afford them. And so hopefully that is part of the economic analysis that we'll be using. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Looking at the attendees online and not seeing anybody else, if you are seeking to be recognized for the public forum and you are online, please raise your hand. Not seeing any other raised hands, so we will close the public forum and move to that consent agenda. And I don't know if you want to, certainly from my perspective, absolutely this review of what fees we want to consider raising to take into account on equity and also that kind of, we know we have certain fees where that's a major concern and other fees where that's lesser concern. That's absolutely going to be part of how we analyze what's possible. And some of that will come from the consultant, a lot of it will come from the administration, the city council.
Yes.
You want to say in reaction to Councilor Bergman's comment?
Thank you. Yes, just to put a little bit more of a fine point on it. The decisions will all still be in the hands of city council and the administration. The point of this user fee study is really to provide these bodies with information that we haven't had before. And the example I give, because it's easy, is usually about camps or classes. So I'm gonna pick on BCA again today and say, for instance, a pottery class. If the pottery class costs $100, at this point in time, we can't say that we know that it costs us $80 to put that class on per person, and so we're making $20, or does it cost us $120 and we're losing $20? So we are a little bit flying blind, and so a big purpose of this study is for us to identify how much it costs for us to offer each of these things, and then to present that as information to the Board of Finance and others to say, do we want to offer classes where it's 100% cost recovery or 100% cost recovery for some groups, or more than 100% recovery for some groups to allow scholarships for others, and it won't be a one size fits all. What we decide to do for classes might be different from camps, from public skating, from parking, but we'll have more information to be able to make, I think, better decisions.
Great. Thank you for adding that, and with that, we'll move to the consent agenda. I guess I just want to offer that additional commentary in the hope that we could still move forward with the consent agenda, but like Councilor Schiff doesn't need more, we can pull the item. With that, I welcome a motion on the consent agenda. Councilor,
I'll move to adopt the consent agenda and take the actions indicated.
thank you. Seconded by Councilor Gang. Thank you. Any further discussion of the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We've adopted the consent agenda. Councilor Jang, yes.
The couple stuff like you, what your items have been passed? With the basketball? So, you know.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Jang, for pointing that out. Good point. That might not have been totally clear. So yeah, to that point, just to make sure everyone's clear what Councilor Jang's means. So there's some minutes passed. There was the contract for Juneteenth 2024. Production and management passed, and then this contract with the utilities passed, and recycling trash and flower truck, which is cost increases passed. Okay, that brings us to 4.1, position elimination and creation at the Burlington Electric Department. Welcome to the best team. To a couple different vintages of best.
Yeah.
Glad you got the blue vest memo, and everybody didn't get it. No. Thanks for taking on these items. Would you like a brief summary or?
Yes.
Great. So I think we're on the position update first. We, as we do with every position, if there's a vacancy, we look at whether we need to backfill and how to backfill. In this case, we had a position that came vacant that was no longer a current position. It was essentially kept for the incumbent, but then would revert to a different position, which would not be ideal setup for us. We actually found we had a need relative to cybersecurity that would be a better use of the vacancy. And so we presented that position description, and it is a tiered position, as we've done with all of our IBEW positions. I want to note for former Councilor Busher, who I provided some information to earlier, the range that I had provided was a little different. I think I provided a range between the upper bound of the A4 and A6 that was around 4,000. It's actually closer to 12,000, but the point being that we're planning to hire at a level that won't impact our budget for fiscal year 24, and the position, whoever is hired will likely come in the lower tier, and then we'll have an opportunity to advance to the upper tier based on performance and meeting the qualifications for that tier. Glad to answer any questions. I'm joined by Emily Stebbins, Wheelock, Amir Cassidy, and for an item later on, we also have James Gibbons on Zoom.
Great, thank you for that, there. So with that, floor's open to the board for questions, motion. Go ahead, Councilor Barlow.
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering about how you came to realize you needed the cybersecurity.
Sure, and it's, I think our IT director is Zoom as well. Yes, Erica Berlin's on well. So Erica, I'll start, but if you have anything to add, jump in. So yeah, cybersecurity is a big deal for any organization, particularly utilities, and particularly municipal utilities, which the threat actor world, perceives as probably relatively less resourced than your privately for-profit investor-owned utilities, but yet we control critical infrastructure. So it's been a concern of our IT team, for decades probably, but it just grows more and more of a risk. Our Moody's analysts are now asking us about it. Just new this year for us to do a survey about cybersecurity. It comes up in our audit, and it's just a best practice. So have we been paying attention to cybersecurity? Yes. Have we devoted pieces of some resources to it? Yes. But has it become more of a full-time job? Yes. And is it a greater need than the certain the integration position that this position would otherwise have become? Yes. So
that's helpful. And
Yeah.
as I expected, that you would be taking cybersecurity seriously, just you've been other people's been delegated across other positions. So,
exactly.
yeah, that makes sense.
Go ahead, Councilor Jenkins.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, I believe, or just before, there were some potential grief of your cyber. There was at least a packet.
Well,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah, so back in 2016, there was a set of articles that didn't end up being fully accurate that indicated that there had been like a Russian intrusion into BED's infrastructure, which was not correct, thankfully, but it was high profile and it certainly drew a lot of attention. I think that's probably what you're thinking about.
That's what but I thought it was recent.
Yeah, it was actually back a ways, back end of 2016, if I'm remembering correctly. And, you know, since then we've, you know, there's always different, things going on, but we haven't had anything that was high profile like that, thankfully.
So, and I think, you know, whenever we talk about cybersecurity, it should not be a person, but it should at least be a team. And was just wondering if this engineer would be able to train the tech team to at least have the basic.
Yeah, Emily and Erica could speak to it as well. The one thing I would say is, particularly under Erica's leadership, our IT director, we've had a team approach very much. In fact, we have implemented, this is relatively new, senior team meetings where we do tabletop exercises. There's been an enhanced effort to go after phishing, email phishing, and we do a lot of our own internal exercises around that. And there's even there's almost a competitive element to it in terms of making sure that you don't end up clicking on something that wasn't the right thing to click on. And so there's been education done by the team. So very much a team approach, not to indicate that this person will be solely responsible, but there will be some expertise there that we can draw on that, you know, we haven't had in the past. I see Erica is on. Erica, if you want to add anything.
Erica, the question is, to what extent will the new cybersecurity engineer position be part of a team, and to what extent will cybersecurity continue to be a responsibility of an entire team and not just one individual?
Sure. So as Darren alluded to, we definitely use a team approach. I mean, that is how we're covering cybersecurity right now. The entirety of the team is responsible for this. In bringing on a dedicated resource. When we wrote the job description, the entirety of the BED IT team was part of that job description process. And we added layers of overlapping responsibility, whereas the cybersecurity engineer is going to have primary responsibility, but we're going to make sure that the systems and network engineer and the systems analyst position all have training and responsibilities and awareness to cybersecurity as a whole.
I'm very happy to make the motion as integrated.
Great, thank you, Councilor Jang. Is there a second to the motion? Second by Councilor Barlow. Discussion. Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously, and we will move to the next BED item, which is the BED Advanced Distribution Management System project. Go ahead.
I don't know, Munir, if you want to maybe just describe the system that we're procuring, and we can mention as well, I know it was referenced in terms of the bids. We did have a total of 5 bids. One was non-qualifying, essentially didn't bid for the entirety of what we were asking for. So we had 4 qualifying bids. And I believe after negotiation, the value we're getting here is competitive with the lowest available bid. But here, go ahead.
Yes. So basically this product replaces our existing supervisory control and data acquisition system, which is the software that control all the devices in the field. And today the way it's done is the dispatcher operates that system from the dispatch room, and then pulls devices in the field to isolate the outage or to do any maintenance work. This system, last time it was upgraded was in around 2015-16. And the vendor, as of March 31st, 2024, was for that system. So it's ready to be gone. So we have gone to bids on 2023. We received 5 bids, 4 were qualified. We have formed a team from the departments, engineering, dispatch, IT, customer distribution, and through all of it, we had demos, we had pay, checks, and we looked at we negotiated the scope of the work with surveillance, as well as the cost. In the middle of negotiating everything right now, and what we ended up getting is a replacement of the SCADA system, plus a couple enhancement, which is an outage management system as well as a distribution management system. And with those enhancements, basically in the future, we're no longer be operating from in manual mode. Everything will be automated. So the system by itself will try to sectionalize the outage in the field and restore service to other customers that. So that what would that do is really reduce the outage duration, reduce the restoration time, and at the same time it will be getting all the information from multiple sources, from these the outage from the MI meters, from phone calls from the customers, as well as from our CIS system, look at all this information and determine where the outages are. In addition to any operation in the field, for instance, there is a switchable. At the same time, we're going to have a better communication system with our customers. We'll be notifying our customers about all the outages via text or email, as well as we're going to have a website with the outage, where the outages are occurring. That will provide the customer all information about estimated restoration as well as where the outages are.
Okay, great. Thank you, Peter. You did that well. Let's see if there are further questions. How would the board like to proceed? Are you ready for a motion or for questions? Councilor McGee.
I'm happy to make the motion as recommended on Civic Clerk.
Great, thank you. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Barlow. Any further discussion? Excellent. This item definitely makes me feel like I've been here for a long time. Replacing SCADA is kind of shocking to me. I remember its implementation very well, but this sounds like it's going to further evolution. So, with that, we'll go to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And that brings us to 4.3, last item for approval and recommendation of the night, and the last BD item, conversion of the BD Energy Assistance Program from a pilot to a permanent rate. What's this there?
Right. So I think the council recall that during the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, we created an energy assistance program, which we had never had before, which was initially just a pandemic-related program. We turned it into a pilot rate at the PUC. We're allowed to do that for up to 18 months where we can offer a specific type of rate with approval. And that 18-month period for this particular program is coming due in February. And so we're interested in making this a permanent offering. This allows income qualified customers to receive a 12.5% discount on their bill. And we are one of only 3 utilities in the state that offer this type of program right now, along with Green Mountain Power and Vermont Gas. There have been efforts in the Public Utility Commission and in the legislature to look at doing something kind of statewide around this, but we're in the relative vanguard. And the other 2 utilities have a 20% discount. But if you look at our actual bills and rates relative to, another electric utility, for example, the 12.5% provides an equivalent level of actual, value because our rates on the residential side tend to be some of the lowest in the state, and our bills tend to be lower in terms of our customer usage of the utilities. So based on our analysis, we think this is comparable to what's being offered by other utilities. Our team is doing a bunch of work to try to make sure we can actually enroll more customers in the program. We have a few hundred customers enrolled right now. We know that we can help hundreds, maybe even thousands more customers. So there's been a concerted effort that Ita in our equity position and Emily's team and others been working on doing outreach on this program. Places like King Street Laundry, the one community center in the Old North End. We've developed a flyer on the program that's been translated into 7 languages that's available. And we're working on some things, in some cases in partnership with other departments of the city, where, and as part of this approval, you would be approving us to be able to auto-enroll customers if we find that they're eligible, as opposed to asking them to come to us and determine eligibility. We think off the bat that could increase enrollment by perhaps 500 additional customers right off the bat, and then help us going forward to make this a program that's helping hopefully 1,000 or more Burlingtonians in the near future, as opposed to a few hundred. So we're excited about this, excited about making it permanent. I'm excited about the work to do additional outreach and make it more accessible for customers. Glad to answer questions.
Great, thanks, Darren. Floor is open for discussion. Councilor McGee.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Darren. I'm glad to see that this program is successful and that you all are making it permanent. And I especially like the auto enrollment function. I think that is essential for municipal services, that we don't make folks do additional work to save money, that if they're eligible for it and we know that, then that they're automatically enrolled. I think that's important. So hopefully that's successful, and we can look to implement that in other ways if we aren't already doing that with other city services. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Councilor Grant.
Hi, thank you. With regards to the information that's translated in different languages, where exactly can those be obtained? Is that something that'll be available in City Hall, or something that we have to go down to the electric department to pick up?
I think currently we've been using it at outreach events around the city, but I don't know if we had plans to make it available at City Hall, but it's a good idea, so we're happy to do it. And we've been using it for outreach at different places. We don't want people to have to come to BED. We want to meet people where they are. So in addition to using it for outreach, we'll certainly work with the clerk treasurer and make some flyers available here as well.
That would be great, because I've been trying to, I kind of have a plan around all resident voting and utilizing a number of businesses in the Old North End. So it would be great to also drop off that information as well. If someone could let me know when they're available, that would be great.
We'll connect with you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Councilor James.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if you can translate into dollar amount, the 225 customers that advantages.
In terms of how much it costs kind of annually, I think we have it, or we have projections.
Projection
Yeah.
after, so assuming, I can, give me a second, I can get you the number if you want it, but assuming we enroll an additional 500 to 600 people, the average discount, so to speak, or the credit that the average customer is receiving is about $10. So doing that math, if we move from about 220 customers today to, 800, in calendar 2024, I projected about $100,000.
So it seems basically by 1 year from now, we should be able to hit the 650 that we targeted.
That's our hope. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now, how is the outreach going? It seems that we only have one staff, which is Ita, or it's a team of people too?
Well, it's the type of program that we reference in multiple avenues. So we've done things like important message on the bill. We've done work on the website and social media, but we've had a specific focus with Ita on doing things like what we're calling office hours at King Street Laundry, for example, or being at different community events that aren't necessarily BED events where we can share information about the program, but So similarly, I think, team approach, and not only BED, but we're working with organizations like CBOEO to get the word out. We've talked with, Water Resources, CEDO, others about sharing information about it as well. So it's very much a team approach, not only at BED, but with other organizations in the community as well.
Yeah, Ita, myself, customer care, our communications group, we meet every 4 to 6 weeks on this to touch base on who's doing what, how did it go, what meetings have we had, what ideas are we trying, and continue to follow up.
I think this is a great idea. Thank you for doing it, especially we can anticipate that the rates may be going up in couple years or couple months. But yeah, thank you, and happy to make the motion as any policy.
Thank you, Councilor Jing. We have a second. Second by Councilor McGee. Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. This brings us now to item 5, which is a discussion of the state auditor's audit of downtown TIF district. Really, this is part of the statutory responsibility of the auditor to do a report on every TIF district on a regular cycle. This is the first time the downtown TIF district is being audited. We have communicated several times to the council about this over time. Just recently, we sent you an update telling you that we believe that the audit report will be issued soon. We have gotten a draft of it, and we have, as the process works, responded to that draft of it, and we are waiting for the final report to be out. So since the final report is not out yet, there's a limited public update that can be shared at this time. That pretty much I've given you the public report that can be shared at this time. There is a desire to ask further questions beyond what was communicated to you in the privileged communication last week. We wanted to put this on the agenda in case people wanted to ask questions. But on the other hand, it was a fairly comprehensive communication that we sent. That is a sufficient update at this point. And you don't want to go into the executive session discussion further. We really don't have anything new or additional to report other than what we shared with you. It's the communication, but of course you could ask questions that we can answer here. So with that, floor is open. How would the board like to proceed? If there isn't a strong desire to go into executive session, then I'll close this item and move on and just offer individual board finance members, if they have further questions, feel free to follow up by email and can get you answers that way. And we do think this will be a public matter, potentially this week or soon. So with that, I will close item number 5 and move to item number 6, which is the presentation from Urban 3 about the economics of community design in Burlington. And there he is. He's back. Good. I'm glad I didn't send you away for too long. Welcome, Joe. Joe, I spoke a little bit before when I'm really excited to be able to have this discussion with the board and talk about the findings that Joe and his team have put together on Burlington. Joe has really become a national expert in property tax policy and interesting ways to analyze and understand property tax information. I have seen his presentations at multiple national conferences over the years, and it is he's also spoken before at some community events here, but this is the first time we've really actually had the chance to sort of dig in and work directly with Joe on Burlington issue. And it's exciting. It's been, of course, for some time. It's exciting to be able to get it to the stage. Do you want to say anything else to preface this, Catherine or Megan?
We brought this to you in the fall of 2022 for contract approval, and at the time we had noted that we were interested in working with Urban 3 and Joe, specifically to help us take a unique insight and look at how both our budgeting is structured, our taxes, how our tax revenue impacts our overall budget, and help us understand a little bit more about certain land use and policy decisions in terms of how they impact the overall taxable value of the city. So definitely heard the question from Sharon Busher during the public forum. And really the intent for us is to help give us as city representatives, decision makers, staff, more information to understand the potential outcomes of policy decisions that we've made in the past and policy decisions that we've made in the future, or we may make in the future. So Joe's really gonna help tee this up for us. And I think we at a staff level have been able to work with Joe and his team in the assessor's office to dig into this a little bit more, to understand how some of what Joe's gonna share dovetails with the reassessment ad hoc committee that was set up, and how we think about things like the forthcoming neighborhood code that you'll see this year, and other implications for the city's work. This will be something that we'll be able to reference for many different purposes.
Great, so turn it over to you.
Take it away.
Welcome.
Sweet, thanks. And Happy New Year, and thank you all for having me here. I almost said y'all. I grew up in actually upstate New York, and my brother went to Rutland for college. Although I've been down here in the South forever. Anyhow, let me share my screen. And Sharon, I hope I can make it clear. This isn't about investment. A real simple way of looking at what we do is, I'm trained as an architect, and there's a lot of policies that make good design near impossible, that make the most sustainable parts of our communities more complicated and more expensive. And oftentimes you can't see them until you visualize the policy. And so if there's anything that we can do is to be sort of a visual aid to help see what's going on financially, so that you can help make better, or so that we can help a community make better policy decisions. So with that, let me share screens. That's kind of what we try to do, is speak in pictures. And here we go. Okay. So y'all can see my screen now. I thank you for taking us on to let us do this project. This has been a lot of fun. It's great to have a community that's very open to and willing to have these discussions about equity. This is a matter that's been a national consciousness for a couple of years, and it hasn't necessarily been taken with a lot of seriousness, given the gravity of the impact of how people pay for their government. This is the root of it, is how you price things. So we're known for making these visualizations, but really see these as pictures of policy and what the effects are in communities. And I'll explain that in a second. We've been all over the country. We've worked in, I think we've only worked in not like 8 of the 50 states in the United States. We're doing work in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and it's because of how we present information. I live in Asheville right now, and what a lot of people don't realize about Asheville is it was really bombed out. This is a picture of Asheville from the 80s and the 90s, and basically people gave up on what our community was, and it was like, you know, we're not urban. Go back to Charleston with that kind of stuff. Get out of here. I ended up having the great good fortune of working for this a philanthropist. Basically, his name is Julian Price. He inherited a lot of money, but he wanted to create a sort of a community revolving fund. How do you help build community within and invest in the right thing? So we spent a lot of time fixing buildings. We also started businesses, the first vegetarian restaurant in town, a nightclub, things that make activity happen in the community, a lot of housing in the downtown for people to live and work in downtown. What we were discovering was the policies and the thinking that is actually makes this stuff difficult. And we would talk about it. When we talk with our community, we use words of like we're a corporation, we're a business trying to function and trying to produce things that the community wants. But so does the community. The community is incorporated just as much as we are. If you look up the word incorporated in the Oxford American Dictionary, it says to create a company, a city, or other organization. So you're incorporated, your county is incorporated, the state of Vermont's incorporated, and so is our country. Joe Biden said this on the Stephen Colbert Show. The United States is the largest corporation in the world. I'm such a nerd, I looked it up. On the bottom of the slide is the US code that lists us as a federal corporation. This is how we operate. So this isn't to say that it needs to be capitalist. It has to operate with some level of financial connection, which is what your committee is doing. So my city of Asheville at $14 billion of taxable value is 7 times the value of Ted Turner. Do you expect Ted Turner to look at some financial data about his businesses? Of course. So I should have those same expectations of my community. So my city, by the way, my state made it illegal for my city to annex land. So my city is a finite boundary of acres that needs to be managed. That's it. That's our farm. And when you talk to farmers about real estate, farmers talk in economic terms. What's the crop yield per acre, the water per acre, the labor per acre? So let's do the same with one of our buildings. So this is a building that we rehabbed. It was an old JCPenney's department store. We put in retail in the ground floor, office on the second floor, and residential above. And we did it because of the city's investment. The city capitalized in the main street and fixed the street, put in bike racks, benches, street trees, all that stuff to make the urban realm work. Folks thought we were subsidized. We're like, for a sidewalk? Okay, fine. Let's say that we got that subsidy, which I could see that. But we took the taxable value from $300,000 to $11 million. So what the community got was a 3,500% increase in taxes. That's money that we're paying for the benefit of being in our downtown, and we're gladly contributing to our community. So go out and build 3,500% more bike racks. Like, let's see more infrastructure. And on the other side of the coin, our city has weird politics. We have hard right and hard left. On the hard right side, people are like, well, you're downtown, you're subsidized. We've got this Walmart over here that's $20 million. And it's like, yeah, that's double our value. I got it. But it took 34 acres of my farm to make that happen. That's apples and oranges. So per acre, apples to apples, we're producing, 100 times more property taxes than a Walmart, double the retail taxes. Who would have thought that a tattoo shop, a beauty salon, and a furniture store is double the production? But it is. Look at the math. Obviously, we have more residents and more jobs. So this is the basis of how to start to ask the right questions about your community, is start to make things apples to apples and realize this isn't complex math that I'm doing here. We already do this when we talk about cars, right? When we talk about these cars, we don't say what the miles per tank is. You realize how silly that is because everybody's got a different tank size. And if I was started to brag about my Ford F-150 getting 650 miles per tank, you'd laugh at me. So rather than per tank, we say per gallon, and the numbers change, and we should all be driving BMW Acetas at 70 miles per gallon. Sorry to the Prius owners, but it's a dangerous little car though, but it is very efficient. I'm making a joke to kind of get you into the vibe of what we're looking at here. So when we see data across 40 different states, for every dollar of county taxes somebody's paying out in the county, their brother inside the prime city is paying about 5 times that. Here's the Walmart, the mall, and this is a 2-story building. This could be Driggs, Idaho, Durham, North Carolina, or Dallas. As soon as you start stacking stories, you're stacking your production. And I kept this whole chart under high-rise code. So it's like this is a 6-story building. Some feedback that I got early on was like, why do you hate Walmart? You keep on bashing Walmart, which I do. But I presented at the International Association of Assessing Officers conference. I'm not making this up. This guy got up and presented at 8 in the morning, and he's the head of Walmart's real estate. And he presented this amazing show on how cheap Walmarts are to 2,500 assessors from across the country. I mean, this was the squarest conference I've ever been to. It's like, it makes a planning conference feel like Burning Man. And I'm sitting there going, all right, this is amazing. Like, think of how efficient that is. He's getting all of his property tax bills lowered in one meeting. No one questioned it because assessors don't care about that. They care about what the value is, right? So trained as an architect, I was sort of having a coronary because I'm like, how is he getting away with this? He basically walked into the room, announced, we're going to pay the lowest taxes, and everybody was cool about it. So I asked him, I said, Mr. Terrell, what's the useful life of one of your buildings? And he goes, 15, 20 years. We designed the building to depreciate it as fast as possible. We'll build another one and depreciate it down again. We don't care about the buildings. So, okay, their commitment, and it's, I know a Walmart isn't exactly a great example to use in Vermont, but a big box or a Dollar General store, they're not designed to last a long time. Their commitment to your corporation is about 15 or 20 years, which is the life cycle of a cat. If you're okay with that, of a very thin level of taxes coming in and cratering, go for it. That's your choice. And you should be allowed to make that choice if it works for your community. So hearing the conversations y'all are talking about is making sure that you're seeing what's going on is music to my ears. I don't know a lot of people that do this kind of interrogation, and it's awesome that you're doing it. So I would argue that people don't know that this stuff is happening is because they're not asking the questions you're asking. And I would say, like, if I could show you your brainstem activity in blue versus your creative thought process in green, why can't we show your economics? Why can't you show you what's going on? So here's my county, 450 square miles. We've got Mount Mitchell Federal Park right here, part of the Blue Ridge Parkway. And just to be crude about it, I've got the scale over here of high value in purple, low value in green, and non-taxable is non-taxable. So I actually have people in my community, which is kind of wild, where they're just like, it's a big park, it doesn't pay me taxes. It's like, okay, fine. Low value over here in green, and this is called Big Ivy over here. And then you see this big purple splotch right there. That's the Biltmore estate. That one property is worth $100 million. Kind of impressive, right? A house for $100 million. But let's be honest. It's a 180,000 square foot house sitting on 8,000 acres of land. This is like having the biggest gas tank. So rather than total value, here's value per acre. And I'll just show it to you in 3D. So when we talk in our community about production, I actually have folks in my county that called our downtown a cesspool of sin when I was on the board of directors for trying to be a helper of the downtown. And was like, really? Seriously? Like, where's the county getting all of its money? Is that big purple spike in the middle of it? That's where we're producing revenue to afford all of this stuff that we want in our community, like greenways and solar programs. We have to raise revenue somewhere. Now, for folks that live out here in Fairview, who are honestly have no idea what we pay in county taxes, we show them these models. And in their defense, they don't know what property is doing in downtown or in West Asheville, which is our version of Brooklyn over here. That's way productive compared to Fairview. So just have the empathy to share with people. We think of this as showing the information in equitable level. We can all see what's going on here. Incidentally, we could see our little village of Black Mountain over here, 13,000 people. You could see its little downtown popping up too. So visually communicate your policies and information. So you invited us in to look at Burlington's assessment process, but we always start with the modeling, and that starts with your tax system. I'm going to walk through, we make these sort of wikis because we have to learn. I'm sort of this cartoon character that has to figure out your tax system and how your taxes work, because we have to produce a model for it to show the cash flow. In North Carolina, our tax system is unbelievably crude. It's just, there's a couple of exemptions if you're a disabled veteran, and that's about it. We don't have homestead exemptions. We don't have anything that our very progressive neighbors to the south in South Carolina have. North Carolina is pretty behind the times. The only thing we can control is the millage rate, and that's our tax bill. For y'all, you have an appraised value, which is the property value based on the estimated and fair market value, so what somebody would pay for it in the marketplace. You have a homestead exemption, so your principal dwelling has the exemption. You can't exempt your second house. All property is considered non-homestead unless otherwise declared, so you have to actually step in and do that. Councilor McGee mentioned automatic enrollment. That would be fairly easy to do very equitably if the mailing address matches the property address. You know that it's owner occupied because that's their mailing address. That could skip a step for some folks if you did that. tax benefits applies to lower education tax rate is part of your system. And basically, we just ran the numbers on $100,000. I know that that's a very low number in your community. We just wanted to pick something that was easy to wrap our brains around. So $100,000. Your appraised grant list value for each of these would be this. So basically, you're taxing a portion of a portion to create your value. You can see the difference between residential homestead exemption, non-residential homestead exemption, and commercial. Commercial properties are essentially assessed at about 120% of what a residential property is. And that's basically, appraised value is. So here's the millage rates, and you'll see the split here in the education for residential versus non-homestead, where there's the tax rate goes higher for non-residential. And this is your splits across education, municipal, and local agreement, just as a chart. So homestead ends up, when you net that all out, pays a lower value in taxes than non-homestead in the education category. But again, remember, commercial's kicking out more. So when you look at the numbers here of what at the municipal level, that's where the commercial property starts to rise up. Now, I will add this, commercial isn't all equal. If you make a really dumb, cheap box, it's going to be very low value versus if you build a commercial product on Main Street out of brick or stone, that's going to have more latent value within it. So from a tax bill or the appraised grant list value to the total tax bill, this is how it works out for each of these properties, for the residential homestead versus the non-homestead versus commercial. And you can see the escalation side by side on $100,000 worth of value, how it works out. We just want to use this as a little example before we launch into how we had to take this and convert it into how your flow happens. So we're going to train the computer to follow the exemptions and do all this stuff as well. But those are only going to be in the residential areas. Your budget, we're pictures people. We like to show pictures. So we get a hold of your budget. This is called a Sankey chart, where you show a flow of the money coming in, which fund it goes into, and then how it gets redistributed. A lot of people can read spreadsheets. I work in spreadsheets all day long, but I like to see a chart. Your property taxes, this is your general flow for it. From your property tax bucket into your general fund, and some of it goes to the capital fund. But you're looking at about 39.5 million for the 2021 year that we started this project. Excuse me, the microphone is slipping on me here. So you do have capital leases, transfers and holdover fund balances. The reason why this bar in the center is bigger than the bar on the left is you're actually drawing in other accounts from these funds here. So your staff has been great at sharing this information with us so that we can put it on a chart so you can see it. So you start at 79, and you get a nice boost with that up to 108. And just finally, to close this section, all states are different in how they operate. In the Northeast, they tend to operate more off property tax. So in blue, it's property tax. For y'all, you're mostly property tax. You have some sales taxes and then other incomes, transfers, as you saw, that come from the state. As you look to the right over here, states in the South in particular, Alabama, Arkansas, we've done work in these places, and it's crazy that they operate off primarily sales taxes. Because think of what happens in the recession when people don't buy a boat or a car or something like that. All of a sudden you can't afford your government. That's their choice. So it's not all the same. We advocate how the Northeast operates because it's more predictable and you have more control. It also has a better connection between the location and how to service it. So for you, the miles per gallon model would look something like this. First of all, here's the miles per tank. This is the total appraised value. So you see the larger parcels on the north end up here, super, super high value. So they're purple in color. Green toward the center of town over here in the neighborhoods of low value. Now, again, that's if you're looking at the total. When you look at the per acre, oh, sorry, here's some call outs to show you some properties. So you go from total value to per acre, you see a heat shift toward the center because those buildings are highly potent. It's because of the density and the height and mass that they have on the properties, but here it is in 3D. So this is your, if you're to drape a blanket across this model, that's your tax rate. It's uniform, but the production is non-uniform based on the land uses that are within it. So here's your core downtown area. And just to zoom in, this is your downtown areas. You see some of the purples in here and heavy reds. Obviously the newer construction over by Battery Street, they're big buildings, they're super potent. They are what they are. Every community is unique. Your uniqueness is the scale of non-taxable in your community. The university, a lot of parks, this stuff is great, but be mindful of that. That takes a lot of taxable value off the production, which puts the burden on the property that's left over to run the city. This is one of, I wouldn't say it's the highest. When you get into the Rockies, in the Rocky Mountains, you'll see a lot more non-taxable because of the mountains. But for y'all, this is what you have. So here's some larger parks and call outs in those areas. So that's what it is. Just be mindful of it. And also this could be an opportunity too. We do work with a lot of communities that actually leverage their public assets to do things like affordable housing, business incubation. They can hold the land and then cooperate a development with a university or developers to do things. So this is an opportunity for you all. In your downtown, this is actually very high. My downtown, by comparison, here in Asheville, we're 100,000 people, and our downtown is about 45% non-taxable. And we're a county seat. We have federal buildings in our downtown. Y'all are at 61% non-taxable. Now, some of this is due to the boundary and how it kind of wiggles around and stuff like that. But you also have a huge waterfront park as part of that. But it is what it is. It's just be mindful of this. This is your most fertile garden is what's in your downtown. So you just want to be cautious about it. So speaking of garden, your downtown is about 3% of the city's footprint, which is the area that the downtown takes up, yet it's producing about 13% of your city's property taxes. So as a ratio of physical footprint to financial footprint, you're looking at a 1-to-4 ratio of productivity. That's pretty good. When you draw out the non-taxable land, you can see the real potency of the taxpayers that are in your downtown. It's a 1-to-11 ratio of productivity. A good downtown, my downtown's 1-to-9. But y'all are beating us. This is good. To compare that against another district, let's say we chose the north side, the new north end. It's about 50%, let's call it 45% of the city's footprint. It's producing less in value or production. About 24% of the city's property tax base comes out of that area. So as a ratio of physical footprint to financial footprint, you see it go backward. It goes from a 1 down to a 0.5. It's predominantly residential. It is what it is. But this could be an opportunity for maybe coaching a neighborhood core, like a walkable area with restaurants and neighborhood services that could be a little bit more productive with apartments above this store or restaurant. Land use types are what make that whole map happen. Think of that map as a bar chart of different land uses. Your residential, on average, this would be an average residential property at about $300,000 of taxable value on 0.14 acres. So I'm going to go ahead and use that as like the bellwether. It just happens to meet the median at 2.1 million per acre. We'll leave it down there on the bottom left just to show you versus other housing types, who's over and under the median. This is about 600,000, 1.1 million, 1.6 million, 1.8 million, 2.3. This starts to jump over the Cayuga property. This is about 5 million an acre. But your average single family across your community, single family detached is averaging about let's call it 2 million for six, so under average with single family. You have other typologies. A lot of communities don't have this stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with the term missing middle, but it's the townhouses and mixed use buildings that were normal pre-World War II, but they've become difficult to do from a zoning standpoint. It's kind of these are some properties that are duplexes. Let's just kind of rip through these. I want to show you this one over here. These are pulling 2.2, 2.7, 2.7, 2.6, and 2.3 versus the average or the median single family at 2.1. These are basically just bigger versions of single family along the street here. They're just duplexes. When you get into this building over here, I'm going to pull my architectural credentials here. Not anything I'd write a home about from an architectural standpoint. It's just a bar drop there, but it's actually pretty potent from a production standpoint. A lot of times when we see something architecturally, we have a bias that kicks in that it may not be that productive, but that's actually pretty productive. But I'm not going to give this thing an award from an architectural standpoint. But it is what it is. It's high density housing in your community. By comparison, the Hula Lakeside office parking lot is about 1.1 million. So that's underperforming. These are opportunities to look at ways to cultivate wealth or cultivate your value so that you can harvest tax production. I would start with the parking lots. So just by comparison, we're looking at a million over here, 1.9, 2.7, and 2.4. So all these neighbors are doing way better than that parking lot. Up to the multifamily now, you're looking at it's sort of all over the board, but you have from 800,000. This is a missing middle right here. It's essentially probably a 8-pack of housing at 9 million an acre. So that's the old style of doing multifamily within a neighborhood that used to be fairly commonplace. The newer stuff, Cambrian Way coming in about 5 million an acre of production. The multifamily on average is about double single family on average. And again, I mentioned this building earlier. It's a big building. It's going to be potent. This one's coming in at about 118 million, let's call it 119 million an acre of production. It is what it is. It's a very big building. It's full of higher end units, and it's producing it, and its value. It's actually the top spike in the model. This is the most productive building in your community. So that's just the cold hard numbers on that. From residential over to commercial real quick. Here's the Ethan Allen Shopping Center down to 1.2 or about average single family residential. Shelburne Shopping Center is about 1.6 million. And I know I'm going fast through all this, but we'll have this for you as a PDF that you can have. 1.9 million for the Hyundai. Subaru is 2.3 million. This is a building we loved. It's 4.1 million an acre for this. That's productive. It's double the productive of the Hyundai dealer. So who would have thought? Very festive. Mixed use buildings. Now again, when you see mixed use buildings for whole communities, people have made these things illegal. Now you're old enough and wise enough to know that they actually work in neighborhoods. And you have this one coming at 10.4 million an acre versus the Ethan Allen Shopping Mall. This is like 9 times the production of the Ethan Allen Shopping Mall right here. Who would have thought? This building's 10.5 million an acre. So you don't have to, I'm not advocating skyscrapers. I'm not advocating big Manhattan buildings. It's just like something like this. Find ways to allow more of this to happen. This is a little weird. It's 43 million. I don't know what happened up here. Somebody dropped a building on top of it, but it's production. It's productive. And then you have these heritage pieces in your community that have been repurposed and recycled, and they keep coming back with tremendous amounts of value. This isn't designed to last 15 years. And though it didn't start its life in its current use, it has had this ability to contribute in your community, which is a great lesson to learn from yourselves. 60 million an acre for this building. Lunig's Bistro at 62 million an acre. So again, you're seeing these patterns. I'm just walking through, think of this, I'm just walking through a bar chart here. And the three-dimensional model is a three-dimensional bar chart of your whole place on a map. This area here has been interesting to look at. So 25 million, 15 million, 21 million, 21 million, 6 million, 16 million. So that it is a spectrum of values across just in that one little corner. But it's all that stuff in the middle of your community that's giving you that very solid base to build your downtown on. So downtown versus residential, really quick, your average across downtown is about 8 million, just averaging the whole lot of it. To compare that against a different parts of your community, your downtown's 8 million. The closest one is the old north and east area at about 4 million an acre of production. Sorry, the St. Paul South Winooski actually comes in at 4.2, then the Old North End, then the Old North End East. And again, this isn't, I hope, Sharon, I hope you're not taking away the like, let's just make some money out of this. That's not what this is about. I just want you to see what's going on in your community so that you can be better informed on the decisions and have a barometer or some meeting gauge to start this. And here's a bar chart of those areas to show how they stack up side by side. Ojex, before I go forward, and you know your community way better than we do. You know these neighborhoods far more intimately than we do. Is this lining up with the way that you thought the communities were producing? Would you expect the far north end to be down in the ones? Actually, let's go to this. This will be an easier way to see it. The far north end down here at 1.4 versus 5 Avenues, it almost double that, or Lakeside is definitely double that. So it's just let the numbers tell you what's going on, and it'll allow you to ask the next question. When you get into downtown, it pops up over here. Okay, so in summary of this part of the presentation, you know what your max value is, you know what your single family and your multifamily, let these be metrics to use going forward. You do have a lot of non-taxable land in your community that is actually an opportunity. I'm not saying sell it to the private sector. I'm saying use it as ways to help your community move forward. And also you've got a really good downtown production. You have a great model and you know that. The equity assessment that you asked us to look at was to look at the pricing of the housing and how it's working inside your model. A lot of communities adopt it's called a computer automated mass appraisal system, or a CAMA model, and it carries forward a lot of practices and standards that are baked into that system that used to be an Excel spreadsheet, and before that it was a ledger form longhand list that was written down. But all those systems add up, and it's not just you. Nationwide, the New York Times did a great publication. If you want a copy of it, just Google that title, and it'll bring up the work of Dr. Chris Berry. Nationwide, this is a problem. We've actually done this analysis here in our community and found it's actually worse here. But they did these maps and these studies, and basically they found these things. I call it a J curve because it looks like a J laying on its side, like it fell down. But they did an analysis from the lowest 10% of housing to the top 10% of housing. And what they found is that it's not a flat line, it's actually bent. In the higher values, it's just baked into the system. And really, it's kind of simple. When you look at the whole system in aggregate as one pile of housing, it's going to find a center point to the mean. And if you use that as the math, it's going to pull the lowest wealth houses up in value and pull the highest wealth houses down in value. It's just simple math. But you can break that down to do better analysis. So this is a quote from your general provisions. The estimated fair market value shall be the price of the property the market is offered for sale and purchased by another, taken into considerations of elements of availability of the property its use, both potential and perspective, and any functional deficiencies and all other. So this is your language. Appraised value should be 100% of the market value. So your total taxable value, taxable property is about 5.6 billion, and total property taxes, you're producing about 120 million out of that. And municipal property taxes, you're looking at 36 million comes to the community, the city, and 25 million, 70% of that is coming from residential. So the majority of your revenue is coming from the residential properties in aggregate. It's just not as potent as the footprint of the commercial stuff. Does that make sense? So the sales ratio, if we're to place this on the ratio, if this is overpriced or underpriced, its appraised value was 272, its selling price was 215. So in this case, this is a house that was overappraised because the market told you what the test score was. So the sales ratio is called a 1.27. This is language that's used in common parlance of assessment world. The way that I like to look at it is this thing scored 127% on its school test, which was the sale price. So it's overachieving in production, which means it's overpaying 27% in taxes. That's at the top of the sales ratio. This is a house that comes out pretty good. The Kama model got it right. It's basically hitting the sweet spot. This is right on par of where it should be. This meets the requirements of the language, the legislative language. And then here's a house at the higher end, appraised value. You can see that it came in the sales ratio higher. So the sale purchase higher, which means the sale ratio it's paying 80% of what it should be in taxes. And that's the way it stacks up: overappraised or overtaxed, accurately appraised, fairly taxed, and undertaxed. So this is the language of how we're going to be looking forward into all of your housing going into this. So if you take all the houses throughout your whole community and put them on a line from the highest value house at the left to the lowest value house on the left, or highest value house on the right, lowest value house on the left, and break it into 10% buckets. And what you want to do, rather than look at all of the housing collectively, just look at it in little 10% buckets and say, what's the median of each of these 10% deciles, let's say. So are they all level? Are they all being assessed at the same one ratio? And when you do that in your community, this is how they plot out. So the lowest 20% of housing are at the highest production. So this is oh, sorry, before I go further, notice how one, or paying 100% of value, is up here. That would be, if everybody was accurate, they would be along that line up there. So everyone is being underassessed from 1 down to 0.92, but some folks are being underassessed far greater than their peers that are in a lower decile. So this is the difference between the mean and the mean adjusted. This is where it should be up here, the regular mean, but we're going to go ahead and adjust it and bring it down to just what's the mean of the group of y'all in the sample. So who's over the mean and who's under the mean. And so this is kind of how that chart looks like if we're just call it over assessed and under assessed, that you have 2.5 deciles that are far over assessed, a bunch in the middle, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4 deciles, 4.5, let's say, of deciles that are under appraised. So we just color coded the line so that you could read it more clearly and understand the concept of how we look at sales ratios by decile. It's called a vertical equity analysis when you do it this way. If there's any economic nerds in the audience, but I just call it the sales ratio chart. You also have a lot of moving parts in your system and how your tax system works. We had to make a chart so that we could explain it to ourselves. You have your fiscal year, your tax year, and you have the lifespan of the appraised value and where the property is linked. So a property may be over here, but it's linked back to a previous appraised value. I don't know what you could do going forward to line these up more clearly, but that's something to consider because you do get lags in certain years where you're drawing backward in time on value that's still carrying forward into the current. But anyway, I just made that chart, or we made that chart so you could see that. Total residential stock across the community, we pulled that. In 20, you've nudged it up a little bit from 2020 to 2023. Sorry, these are the sales in those years. Sorry, not stock. It's the sales of the stock. And this is just the data of that, the sales and transactions. This is what's giving you your current information about what people are paying in the marketplace. And this is what you want to pay attention to. So you have about 4% turnover in 2023. Obviously, the mortgage rates are going to slow that down over this next cycle. So we went ahead and plotted it in 2020, what your chart looked like, in 2021, what your chart looked like, and just to show you, there in each of the samples, you have these trends where it all bends the same way. There isn't a magic cleanup on this. This is a lot of movement that you need to work on and continue to work on. I'll have some recommendations at the end of things that could be the early steps. But basically, this is you have this trend package in that whole window. So here they are, just kind of lined up next to each other. The same information you saw earlier, just laying on the same chart. What's interesting to see is that you're actually moving in a more positive direction toward accurate. So you're going from, you dropped down a year, but then you kind of leapt up, and 2023 kind of dropped down again. There's going to be movement in this, but as long as you're moving upward toward one, that's a good direction. So continue to do this going forward. This is just one way of looking at it that I just showed you. This would be accurate. If you want to judge fairness, this is where fairness is whether or not the fairness is within its same sample. So here's fair. So you can see how much of the areas are under fair by year. And again, for every dollar of taxes paid at the high end in 2020, the bottom decile paid about $0.11 more is a way to look at it. In 2021, we do the same thing. For every dollar paid, it got worse, 25 cents. In 2022, it went down to 120, and then last year it got better at 14. So even though they may look like they're still not moving, you are actually moving in a good direction here. And I hope that makes sense. Oops, sorry, I forgot to click the button. Pre-evaluation and post-evaluation in 2021 and 2023. Here's what pre and post look like. So again, you're moving in the right direction. This is you're doing some great things now. Just looking at those 2 years side by side. Again, accurate would be up here. Fair is here. Do y'all before I keep going, do y'all understand the difference between fair and inaccurate, what I'm talking about here?
We're seeing some heads nodding, Joe.
Okay. So pre-evaluation, this is how it looked. And post-evaluation, sorry, let me go back. That was fast. So pre-evaluation, it was let's just jump ahead. It was 21 cents, and post-evaluation, it dropped to 14 cents. This is another way of measuring it. In the gap distance between low value homes and high value homes, it's a 20% difference. You're down to 16%. So you're making improvement. The appeals process, we went ahead and looked at that as well. You've had 440 appeals, 5.2% of all residential properties. And the total value of your community went from 250. There's a tremendous amount of drop in your value of residential. And it's dropped big on the chart. It's 8% decrease across the system. So you've got a $20 million value drop there in appeal. As far as homeowners that win their appeals, this is a question of equity as well. You can see there's a higher level of participation in appeals at the high end. And when you look at the success rate, you see at the $300,000 range and at the over $600,000 range, a higher rate. It may be worth looking into the language of how people appeal and whether or not they're just saying, I don't like paying taxes. That's oftentimes those folks may be frustrated, but they get immediately thrown out because they don't talk about the value. But anyway, these kind of outliers and swings will be worth looking at and seeing why these are such a low success rate. Now, as far as the change in appraised value by the people that are successful, this is another way of looking at it. That you see the amount of value taken out and decrease as you go up the chain. And well, obviously those properties are going to be worth more, so it's going to be a bigger chunk, but you're losing 11 to 12% here versus 9% in the second decile, in the $300,000 range. And then this is the same information as the bar chart to show you the total discount in houses under $300,000 of value, between 300,000 and 350, 350 and 400, 400 and 500, and then over $550,000. They've been awarded about the top 20% of discount just in that one tranche, if you will. Okay, it's a lot of nerdy charts. It's a lot of data. It's not easy to present this stuff at a night meeting. So I want to thank you for your patience. Our recommendations are fairly simple. You want to increase the frequency of assessments. We work with communities that do them annually. Find ways to think of the more you're getting feedback, the more you're going to be able to do improvements and nudge things forward. It'll just give you more opportunity to see what's going on in the marketplace and be more fair about it. You want to incorporate vertical equity into the studies and sales ratio analyses. You want to break things down into smaller buckets, basically. The 10% buckets are what we recommend and literature recommends to basically hone in on the medians. You want to evaluate the appeals process while you're also looking at the modeling process. And another thing you could do is maybe fund a third-party organization to help folks with lower incomes that need an appeal. Our community works with a group called Pisgah Legal Group that is a nonprofit pro bono attorneys that help folks with the appellate process. In South Bend, the legal department at the university at Notre Dame University helps folks. So that could be a partnership with the university as well. But there's clearly noise in the information that shows that the lower end properties are having a harder time. Consider partnering with other folks. I know New England has borders between places, but I just wanted to put this in here. Your county is about the same area and population as my county. And so we have one county staff operating in this boundary, and think of all the municipalities and jurisdictions in here. Could you just share some information? We know of communities that actually buy data from Equifax or that was the other group, TransUnion, where you can actually buy what people write down on their properties and get that data. I know it's expensive, but if you shared it collectively, that could help everybody. And you're all wrestling with the same problem. So maybe pool your resources. Another option is create a uniform tax abatement. We're working in Pennsylvania, in Allentown, and the assessor is contemplating sorry about that. A uniform tax abatement of, in his community, it's $350,000 he's considering. Maybe try 75. You're going to have a bigger impact on the lower wealth housing because it's going to raise the bottom for everybody. It's a uniform abatement across the system. You're not violating state policy or your constitution, but what you're doing is you're giving a more progressive way of raising the bottom for everybody. Continue your commitment towards transparency. We're seeing a lot of places waffle. They went into this great 2 years ago, and now it's a lot of habits are coming back. So y'all are doing great with that. You're a great model for this, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to do some math. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. And opportunity for some discussion. So I'd say floor is open for questions. We're not here proposing specific actions here tonight. It's an opportunity with to talk directly to the people who created this report. We can have some follow-up after here as well, but floor is open if people have questions.
First, thank you. This is very comprehensive. And was just wondering, when did it start?
This was
We worked on this for about a year, not consistently throughout that time. We did have a little bit of a pause on our end, just for some other projects that we were working on, but yeah.
I mean, I really hope that we have this 5, 6, 10 years ago. This is great. But also was just wondering, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I'm in the room as well. So like if anyone has questions directed towards me, that I would be more than happy to answer these questions. I think Joe hits on a lot of points. I think some of the what he's talking about is real. It's not a Burlington specific problem. It's a national problem. He's right about models. I mean, I've been an appraiser for over 20 years, and it's not just in tax appraisal. It's in every aspect of the property value. A lot of the things he mentioned are state issues. I would love nothing more than for us to get with Winooski and Essex and share information and share data. But the way Vermont is set up, it makes it difficult. So it's not that we don't want to do it. It's a lot of statute and regulations associated with it. But no, I appreciate his information. And I appreciate what he said about the amount of value per acre associated with some of these parcels. And that's right. And I can see that in some of the properties that we have that can produce. That's a real thing to look at. And I'm glad you can shed some light on that. But yeah, good stuff.
I mean, the presentation validates some of the things that are going on right now. That parking lot you pointed out, that is generating so much less per acre for the city than the Lakeside neighborhood is. Of course, we just upzoned it dramatically in a mixed use zone and have the effort going on, the joint venture between the city and the developers there to, hopefully in 10 years that same chart would look very different. Similarly, the neighborhood code work that Megan has been leading really, we come at it in a lot of ways from a housing production perspective. How do you deal with this dramatic supply challenge that we have? But I think what the presentation sort of points out is if you were trying to come at it from a taxes generated per acre, you'd get to some similar set of solutions for a lot of the cities. So that's sort of nice to see that it kind of validates that direction of the neighborhood code a lot, I think. One thing that I appreciate being pointed out in the presentation pointed out too, although you'd have to the point that this is a national problem, that's part of how we got here. I read that New York Times article when it came out at the time, saw some of the national discussions of it, thought when we were kind of coming out of the reappraisal that we should really be doing this, kind of comprehensive review of how Burlington's doing that. I think was there, we sort of pointed out, I think there are many parts of the country that have a far greater disparity, more uniform. You kind of can look at ours and see that I think there is a relative we do pretty well in terms of fairness for much of the kind of middle, the 20th percentile to the 90th percentile, there's a pretty high degree of fairness is what it seems to me that this analysis shows. At the ends, we have a challenge, but it's no longer, it is, and it's a challenge that we should, I think we all feel we need, now that we kind of see it, we need to keep working on and do something about it. I think it is worth noting that it is a much smaller disparity than many other communities have. It's like the work that's happened beforehand, there has been before. So those are my reactions.
I also think the other reaction that I've had in working with Joe, and I think he's mentioned this a couple times specifically in reaction to the question that Sharon asked in the public forum as well. You know, looking at the amount of non-taxable land in the city, you know, one of the things that we talked with Joe's team about when we were making these graphics is just that that's really a visualization of Burlington's values. We have almost 40% of the land area in the city that is in some kind of park or natural open space that we are intentionally conserving. So when we look at that in addition to institutional property and other city-owned property, state-owned property, we really start to see kind of how that impacts how much of our land is actually generating the tax revenue, but it's really a picture of our values. And so I think that helps us when we make decisions like you all have been talking about Gateway and what does Gateway look like that helps us both meet the city's goals and values, but helps us to generate new revenue through development there, so.
And lastly, I think people may not know the outcome of your administration, but from my perspective, he painted it out here very beautifully. Because one of the biggest buildings that are generating a lot of resources for the city come from the administration. And I also completely agree about the thinking outside of the box, getting out of Burlington and collaborating surrounding with this. It's a key aspect for the next year. This is great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor King. Go to Councilor Barlow, and I see Councilor Bergman has the hand up as well.
Thank you very much for that. I like those data dense presentations, although I have to confess I was starting to be pretty filled up about 75% of the way through it. But even so, a couple of reactions. When you were showing the graphic of the downtown properties values and the production there, I can't help but think back to when we were doing some of the tax appeal site visits after the most recent reappraisal, and my surprise that the income approach to value that's used to value a lot of those properties didn't necessarily value them at their highest value had they been used differently. There's some properties that in the high value areas in your study that have, you know, productive first floor uses, but second, third floor uses that are significantly underutilized, and that directly played into the valuations of those properties. So as just a, you know, from a methodology standpoint for valuing these properties, we have to somehow figure out a way if we're going to realize the potential that was described to us tonight, how we're going to pivot on the way we value those commercial properties. So that's not strictly income, current income, but maybe more around highest best use. The other thing that I think that you in your recommendations around doing more frequent appraisals, you know, we have a very complicated education tax system in the state, and I think it's almost 70% of our property tax goes to pay for education, and so there's a lot of state interplay with our ability to affect property taxes, I think, in some ways, in terms of implementing those recommendations. So I didn't know if there was anything that you thought might hinder us or help us in some way based on that relationship we have with the state on the education property tax?
Sure. Yeah, actually, we've been in communication with several members of your state legislature that want us to investigate what if you went toward a land value tax. So they're ripe for the conversation of wanting to understand. I mean, that's a pretty big move. Do y'all understand land value tax? It's Henry George tax. Have you ever heard of Henry George? There's a great he's a tax economist from the late 1800s, and his simple concept was, why is it that that somebody could step off the Mayflower and own a bunch of land in Boston? Meanwhile, we're dealing with all of this immigrant population that's coming in, and they're being forced into tenements. And meanwhile, you could sit there with a yard and no building and be taxed at that value rather than what you've taken from society. Great book called Progress and Poverty that came out in the turn of the century. Helen Keller wrote in the preface supporting the book. I mean, the guy was a rock star, did lectures all over the country. There were some people that followed him around, and they were known as Georgists. The New York Times did a great article on it recently because Detroit is considering going toward this tax system. One of my favorite side stories of this is one of the followers, the acolytes, her name was Elizabeth Maggie Phillips, and she was a Georgist. And she realized it always gets complicated for adults. It's like, well, let's kind of talk this through. And she's like, I'm not going to work with adults anymore. So she invented a board game called the Landlord's Game. It's now Monopoly. And think about the rules of Monopoly: location, land assembly, and you put a building on it. So as you're having your discussions, think about it. What's your 2-drink minimum for a property? So how much have you invested in snow plowing, a sidewalk, a garbage truck has to go by? Yeah, you're not using it, property owner, but we've already invested. We need our revenue. We shouldn't let you underbuild or underdevelop on our community. There's a base that we need to hit. And this is the thing, as you talk about, I mean, you talked about this with the pottery classes. Why not talk about it from your city's perspective? So that's where land value taxation comes in, is like raise the base at a level that's fair across the system. And if you want to choose to speculate and do nothing with that property and keep it a surface parking lot, good on you, but we at least need to recoup ours. And I think that's the psychology to take into it. But also, since your state is talking at that level, it's good to open the door to them and say, we have some other ideas. It's like they know that the system is screwed up too, and their hand is in on it. Does that make sense? There are two more things, since you mentioned what other places. This is let's see if I can do this right. This is your sales ratio. You go from 0.9 down to about 0.75, right? Below the limbo bar up there would be fair. This is my community of Buncombe County. The poorest are being overtaxed at about 1.18, while the wealthiest are down at 0.9. So this is a problem that we have all across the country, and just no one's never really looked at it this way. So this isn't your assessor's fault. It's not the CAMA model's fault. Well, it technically is, but we just kind of carried forward these systems that have been in place. 2 books I'd recommend, and then I'll shut up. This book came out a while ago. You probably all know about it, Color of Law. The follow-up book is called Just Action. And there's a lot of great ideas in here about how to help, that you're actually doing some of that right now. So I don't know if that was part of your plan or not.
For years, Joe, I hosted an occasional book group called the Mayor's Book Group, and we read The Color of Law as one of them a number of years ago. I have not read the follow-up though. That'd be I'm glad to know. I actually didn't know that came out. That's great. Councilor Bergman, go ahead.
Thank you. I will hope not to cough too much. Every time I talk, I do that, so you're lucky. So I really appreciate the presentation. I actually think it's a great intro, and I echo much of what my fellow councilors have said already. I think it would be very helpful to me to get more granularity on the numbers and the locations for the low income houses. I mean, I'm suspecting that $200,000 houses are like falling apart. And it'd be helpful to know sort of like, it's in the 10th, but actually, I think if you're doing 10%, so you had those, but that would just be helpful. And also the locations in there. I was struck, I represent the Old North End, in sort of the center part of the city. And I was struck at the numbers there in our ward, and I've lived here for almost 40 years, or actually more, compared to the new North End. No offense to you, Mark and Ali, but I mean, that was just striking. And I know that our folks are, primarily low and moderate income folks and renters. So and they're suffering wicked high things. So it would be really helpful, I think, to get real clarity about locations as well as numbers that yeah, you could see that. I mean, that was striking. I think I saw it in the presentation. And the other thing that I would hope that we could get, and you started to allude to it with the Color of Money and the follow-up book, but you had one example of an alternative excuse me, the abatement, just making a flat abatement, but and you just raised the land tax, which we've been looking at. People in my caucus have been interested in as well. So you have some local folks who are interested in that idea. But perhaps there's also a municipal equivalent to the state education fund where there is income sensitivity, and it would be very, very helpful to sort of understand the panoply of ideas and the extent to which we don't have the statutory authority to do them. Well, that's never stopped me from trying to get the statutory authority. So I don't think that just because it's not in the range of acceptable opinion, we need to accept that. I would like to open that window significantly farther. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Grant.
Thank you. I was just wanted to repeat, I agree with what Councilor Bergman just said. I too am a councilor from the Central District, which is the Old North End, and I found, I need to go back and listen to it again, because I am kind of multitasking still at work. But yeah, some of these numbers were just very telling to me. And also some of the numbers around the reappraisal, the reappraisal appeals were very rough, very problematic. In fact, we had a whole committee to review that process because of the complaints around it. So I didn't find some of that to be surprising, but yeah, it's just kind of a grave concern considering the people that live in the area. And I guess there's really not much more to say than what Councilor Bergman said. It is very telling information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe, could you I just want to make sure, especially after the last couple of comments, we're all kind of sharing, understanding what's driving that disparity between like the new North End and the old North End. And you kind of discussed two different phenomena here, at least, well, more than two, but two big ones that came up a lot. What's shown in this graph is not really necessarily related to the J curve that you were talking about before, right? This is to a large degree a function of density, right? And like the amount of land area built on, setting aside the downtown for a moment, but the old North End is it's quite dense. The lots are small. lot coverage is high. The new North End is a more suburban area, the lots are big. The houses in many neighborhoods are actually quite modest houses and with a fairly low lot coverage ratio. My sense is that's driving a lot of that difference there, is that
Oh,
just sort of-
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, this is
That's not a sort of sense of fairness necessarily in terms of what the other charts were showing of is a fairness.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I could be more clear. Yeah, this is
I think
productivity.
you were clear, but I just
Yeah.
want to, I just want to make sure, well, I want to make sure I was interpreting it correctly and
Yeah.
because it was surprising even for me who understood this to be about density. It still is surprising to see the old North End compared to these other neighborhoods at this higher valuation.
Well, I get picked on here in town. I mean, trust me, the Biltmore family lets me know that they don't like me showing that model where their building just kind of flattens out to nothing. And they're like, could you please stop showing that? I'm like, no, it's data. You know, it's just because they're proud of their property, but it's like, come on now, it's 8,000 acres. It's 108, you know, so it is kind of a little bit of a joke that they blow all of that real estate. But would our community be different if we lost them? Definitely. I mean, it's a tourism attraction. We're proud of it to an extent. There's a legacy here that we have to still wrestle out a little bit with the Vanderbilt wealth in our community. But you know, it's real simple. A bigger property is going to take all of that. So when you do that, just realize there's a trade-off. You know, that property is now maximized its frontage. I mean, just think like a snowplow. Do you pay more with the snowplow when you have 200 feet of frontage versus somebody that has 50 feet of frontage? Should, right? It's just thinking at that level and just asking yourself to go through these questions allows you to rethink yourself a little bit about what biases we carry in our properties. This maybe jarred some biases by putting that out there.
And you know, I think it would be very interesting if we ask the neighborhood code, and then in a lot of ways what the neighborhood code would allow is more of the city to be built like the older sections of our city, like the old North End. And you might, you know, in 30 years, there might be considerably narrower deviation on this, I would think. Is that what you say, Megan?
Yeah, definitely. And in the context of the neighborhood code, we've not only been talking about what types of homes, Joe referenced multiple times, things that we've made illegal over time, which is certainly true here in Burlington. But even just how we have separated the uses that are allowed in different parts of the city. So Councilor Jang knows that we've been talking about having a new North End plan. And one of the things that we've heard over and over again as we've been doing outreach related to the neighborhood code is people not only saying, yes, let's have more housing choices within these neighborhoods that are largely single family neighborhoods, but also let's better utilize the avenue and let's make opportunities for like not only more Henry Street delis on the avenue, but more of the property that was there at the intersection of Interrail and North Street.
Really, Councilor Jane, you have been saying this for years, haven't you? You've been saying we need a new North End, planned VTV, and
And we've even just seen the example, yeah.
We made progress.
Thank you. Okay, so do you want to say any final thoughts on where this goes from here and what the councilors might expect to hear more on this or?
Happy to answer more questions about this information. I think as Joe and Catherine and I have been looking at bringing this project with Joe's team to a close, we've been thinking about ways that we can utilize this information in all sorts of work that we're doing as a city. So whether it's about the reappraisal process itself, whether it's helping us understand our budgeting process, or even as it's helping us understand policy decisions about land use. Certainly a way that we see ourselves kind of coming back to this information. And I was taking some notes about questions that the members had asked about potential other steps that we might be able to take as well.
Great.
So we'll follow more.
All right, I was about to wrap up, but Councilor Grant, would you like to get back in?
Yeah, I guess I'm starting to mold this a little bit, and I am, you know me, I'm always talking about equity in our city. Our city has a lot of issues around the lack of equity. And there was the way we were hit during the reappraisal, some of the highest increases in the city on the majority of the people who live in the area have a lower income. So this is just really, I'm really kind of thinking about this. Is it because we are close to the lake, we're close to the parks, you know, because sometimes you go and you look at some of these houses and the reappraisal was basically the tear down value. If you tore down this building that was on the verge of collapse anyway, and you built something new, then the assessment would be appropriate. We definitely saw a lot of that where people they felt that, you know, they're not looking at the condition, they're not looking at what I can afford to do to fix this place up or not be able to fix it up. So yeah, I think we need to really, as a city, look at this in terms of fairness, and then around how we handle future appraisals and future appeals toward appraisals. Because these comparisons are pretty stark. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Grant. Yes, the point of doing this is to look at all our processes. I do hope the point came through clearly that the reappraisal helped dramatically. We are substantially fairer after the reappraisal than before, a little bit less so over time as the appeals process. The appeals process, I think there are some structural reasons why the appeals process do benefit higher income people over time, and this idea that maybe we do something to assist people with lower value properties is a really interesting one that is sort of a new idea that I think is definitely an interesting come out here. And so the reappraisal process is not perfect. There's some structure. I think the point that Joe made that was made repeatedly here is like there's some structural things in just the way America does property assessments that and the averaging that takes place in it that are almost by definition going to create that J curve, and that Burlington's is less than a lot of places. But I do absolutely agree that this raises a lot of important. The reason we did this is because we were aware that this is a phenomenon and thought we should really dig into it, and this gives us, I think, more details to dig into than we've had before, and everyone agrees we need to do that. So
Will the city council have access?
Yeah, we'll make sure that everybody has access to the presentation as well. Jenny?
Great. So Joe Minicuzzi, thank you very much again. You sense you've sparked an important conversation here in the community. Thank you for your hard work on this and your leadership on these issues in general, and look forward to it.
Yeah, thank you all. And if there's more that we could do to help you, just let us know. And I guess that my takeaway and what I've heard in this meeting is like, and now you know, so that's a good thing. So thank you all for having the curiosity and the interest to do this. We appreciated it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Take care.
You too.
So now, the recommendation will be clear. And I would just now wondering about what the next step would be in terms of implementing it and doing more research in the state.
Yeah, so I think this is where like each of the departments that we're collaborating on this project will need to do some work in terms of how we might implement the recommendations that are relevant to our work. I think there was some discussion about some of the things related to the appraisal process are things that Joe and Catherine will work on, particularly as it relates to changes in state law and changes to state process. From our perspective, we're from a planning perspective, we're starting to implement some of these recommendations with the forthcoming neighborhood code, with the zoning changes that you'll be receiving. So we're trying to, at the staff level, start to think about how we operationalize the different pieces of this.
Lastly, what would be the role of CCRP in supporting the city of building alignment between the surrounding
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know if you haven't thought about that. Taxation is a little outside of my normal world. But certainly the RPC has been a really good partner in helping municipalities, like they've helped us share data in other ways. So we could bring the idea to them. One of the things that was even recommended to us by this group is not so much about doing our appraisals together, but about looking at data on sales at a multi-municipal level to understand kind of how this is happening across the county. Certainly then there were some ideas about actually like sharing those services, but.
The basis of it all is based on those transactions. So if you have the transactions, you have the sales, that creates a foundation of accurate information to form the assessment off of. So when you collaborate and you can share this information across borders, then it just makes everyone's information that much more accurate. So, you know, I even said this to Joe when we were having a meeting. I said, the more information you can give me, the more efficient, effective, and accurate it's going to be. So, you know, the state's working on this with Act 68, and they're trying to get a statewide assessment program, and they have the right idea. It's just, you know, getting more information and working together on some of these things is really the answer. But it's hard in Vermont. I mean, people want to keep their communities. So cracking that egg is a real problem for the accurate information and assessment.
We'll have a new governance. Next step.
Okay, thank you everyone. It's this has become a lengthy meeting, but I think the interest in this was great. So Megan, thank you for leading the process on this, bringing us another great piece of work coming out of your department. If there's no objection, that is the whole agenda, right?
That's the whole agenda. We got it adjourned.
We are adjourned at 7:31 p.m.
Thank you.